Hello and welcome to the Scatterable channel, and today I want to show you guys my latest and greatest $500 gaming PC build guide with parts that are in stock, available, and not overpriced. And you saw that right? This build does use an Intel processor, but guess what? It doesn't change a damn thing about how much value and performance is packed inside of this $500 gaming PC. If you want smooth 1080p, 144 frames per second gaming on a PC that could potentially cost less than a next generation console, which for the most part on the majority of its games will still be locked to 60 frames per second on titles like Fortnite, CSGO, Valorant, and Rainbow Six Siege, then you've come to the right video. This custom $500 gaming PC also outclasses a lot of other pre-builts for a more expensive price, like the NZXT Starter Plus PC, which features fairly similar components. However, this PC has more graphics performance and costs $200 less, which leaves more money in your pocket for, say, buying a monitor, a keyboard, mouse, whatever you want. If you did want a full build tutorial guide that's like a hold your hand sort of approach, I do have that linked in the description below, which does feature an Intel section for how to install an Intel processor. And even though that build tutorial does use different parts than the one in this video, the overall build process is still the exact same. And any sort of differences you might come across that could be different from what you see in that tutorial versus what you see here can be specified through the manual, because those are what manuals are for. Guys, building PCs are not as hard as you think. And pro tip, the cheaper your PC is, the easier it is to build. And pro tip number 2, once you know how to build one PC, you basically know how to build them all. Because again, the build process is nearly the same. 2 weeks from now, I'll be releasing a setup video including this PC as well as other components and an overall setup that'll cost less than $1,000. So it'll be a great budget setup for those of you wanting a lot of value and gaming performance for the money, but not for overspending it. So I'll have that coming out really soon, so you might want to subscribe for that. And finally, I do have a PC giveaway happening on my Twitter right now, and the details for that are also linked in the description below. All right, let's get into the parts list. So first of all, every single component I list in this video will be linked in the description below. And if you're wondering, yes, all the components in this PC are compatible. No need to throw it in a PC part picker link. I've got all that stuff laid out for you in the description below. Just add it to your cart and boom, you're ready to go. So in this video, I'll be showing you guys 2 different versions of the $500 gaming PC. A base version, which will get you right off the road and get you running for 1080p gaming, but basically lacks Wi-Fi and I guess prettier looks. But I have an upgraded model with RGB fans, that Wi-Fi adapter, a custom CPU cooler, and a more powerful graphics card, which will allow you to stream and game at the same time. So starting with the processor, this is all revolving around the i3-9100F, which is a 4-core, 4-threaded processor for $70. Right now, I think the i3-9100F is a criminally underrated processor at $70 because it's just been overshadowed a bunch by Ryzen. And if you're wondering, I'm just gonna be totally transparent with you right here, the best budget gaming processor you can get is the Ryzen 3100 and Ryzen 3300X. But the problem is that they're never in stock, and when they are severely overpriced compared to their base MSRPs. And even if you did get your hands on one, finding a compatible budget BU450 motherboard is also hard and also overpriced. So with those factors in mind and seeing how stable and in stock the i3-9100F and B365 motherboards have been over the summer, I'm confident in going with this choice for this budget gaming PC, and it's also the much cheaper option, which allows us to use that extra money for other components in this PC build. And by the way, in the box you are given a stock CPU cooler with pre-applied thermal paste, so no need to get an aftermarket cooler. But if you wanted something cooler, I do have that aftermarket passive Arctic Alpine 12 cooler, which, I mean, doesn't really do great in terms of cooling, but it's $14 and it looks really cool and it's inexpensive again. So that's another option if you want to go with that. The motherboards I would like to use for this gaming PC would have to be the Asus Prime B365MA or the MSI B365M Pro VHD, because both of those feature 2 fan headers versus everything else which only features one fan header, which with the case in this PC build, it comes with 2 fans pre-installed, so both those motherboards will work great for hooking up those fans inside the PC. But if you don't care about those 2 extra fan headers, any B365 micro ATX motherboard will work with this PC build. And since that motherboard does use the LGA 1151 socket, you are welcome to use any 8th gen or 9th gen Intel processor on this motherboard. Now, of course, you can't overclock because this is not a Z390 motherboard, but I personally think that's not a deal breaker since there are diminishing returns when you say overclock a processor above 4.2 gigahertz for increased gaming performance. You're only really going to notice a lot of like high clock speed gains if you're doing a CPU intensive application like video editing or rendering, which for those of you who clicked on this video, you're a PC gamer and not exactly a video editor or 3D renderer. But quick note, every single B365 motherboard out there does not come with Wi-Fi in the motherboard itself. You will have to get your own Wi-Fi adapter for that, but you do have an Ethernet jack if you want to get a direct connection from your PC to your router for the fastest and lag-free experience. Next for RAM, I have 16 gigabytes of DDR4 26 megahertz memory. You can choose any kit at that speed and that cast latency, but for me, there's this really cool kit from Olowi that is $48 and it meets those speed specifications, so that's going to be great for maximizing the budget of this PC with that really inexpensive RAM kit. Though you are welcome to use higher speed RAM like 3000 megahertz or 3200 megahertz in this PC, but you won't be able to use those advertised speeds since on B365 motherboards you are limited to a speed of 2066 megahertz. You can still use them, but they won't run at the full speed, so quick note on that. Now for the graphics cards, I have 2 options. An option for just basic 1080p gaming and an option that is slightly faster but can allow you to stream. So for the graphics cards, I have the RX 570 4GB graphics card and the GTX 1650 Super for a little bit more money. Both of these graphics cards scored the best in my budget graphics card roundup, providing the most frames per dollar if you look at that video, which is why I'm throwing them into this PC build guide to get you the most bang for your buck. These graphics cards are going to be like the secret sauce behind achieving 144 frames per second in your favorite games to utilize, say, like the full refresh rate of your monitor that may be like 144 hertz. Now for the power supply, you are welcome to use any 500 watt 80 plus bronze power supply of your choice because this system at peak 100% load is going to be using about 370 watts. So you've got quite a bit of room to say throw in a faster graphics card or faster processor or more hard drives or SSDs if you want. Now, if you want to know what's a good budget power supply and a bad budget power supply, I'd refer to the power supply tier list found on the LTT forums webpage, which I'll have that linked in the description below. And I personally stick to tier C or above for a budget power supply, which means don't get the Thermaltake Smart 500 watt 80 plus watt power supply. I'm telling you right now, we've had so many instances of that power supply failing on our Discord server or even shorting out other components in their gaming PCs to the point where I'm just like, don't even consider it. Now for storage, you can use anything like a hard drive, an SSD, or an M.2 SSD, but for this build guide, I'm using a 480 gigabyte SSD from XPG. Or if you want something that's a little bit more in terms of capacity, there's also a 500 gigabyte T-Force Vulcan SSD that you can get as well for another inexpensive price. But the things that I like about both of these SSDs are that they feature the SM2258 microcontroller, which basically means that the speeds that you're getting at the start of the lifespan of your SSD will stay the same even near the end of its lifespan. There are a lot of budget SSDs out there which are really fast at the start of your gaming PC's lifespan, but will slow down a lot. So the SM2258 microcontroller does a good job in preserving those speeds as well as increased security on that drive. For the case, you are welcome to use any micro ATX or ATX case of your choice. So just for this build, I'm using the Lee & Lee 205M. It's a micro ATX case with a real tempered glass side panel, and it comes with 2 pre-installed fans, which is nice to see. But this case also just has a nice build quality. There is no plastic on it, and in my opinion, is a way better like flat front black looking case than that AeroCool Cylon case that I see in so many other budget build guides that has no front panel intake. So your PC will suffocate if you get that case. But again, you're welcome to use any micro ATX or ATX case of your choice. The NZXT H510, the Cooler Master MB311L, the old case from like the 2000s that is ATX, that'll also work too. As long as it has an MATX or ATX in the product title, it's gonna work with this PC. So those are the main parts of the gaming PC, but if you want to add on any other accessories, like what I have in my upgraded version of this PC, I do have that Wi-Fi 6 card adapter, which was about 30 bucks. I do have a 5-pack of RGB controllable case fans, which was about $34, which by the way, were really easy to install because they all are just like a single cable plugged into a fan controller that was controlled by like a remote. So really easy. And I've also got braided power supply cables and of course that passive Arctic Alpine 12 cooler that was 14 bucks. Now we've made it to the streaming portion of this video, and I'm going to quickly show you how to stream on this $500 budget gaming PC. It's way easier than you think. We're not launching like the Falcon 1 space rocket. We're just doing like 10 or less clicks to stream. It's not that hard. So I want to do this for Streamlabs, but you can totally do this in OBS as well if you want. Both are pretty much the same program, but you click this little settings button right here, and you click here to output. So at the moment, it should be on simple. I want you to switch to advanced, and then this is the most important part, change your encoder from software to NVENC new. That'll guarantee you the best GPU-based streaming encoder that's available through NVIDIA graphics cards. Then for bitrate, set that to wherever you want, but for the moment, I'm going to keep this at 5500 kilobits per second. You're welcome to reference Twitch's bitrate guidelines. That's a whole nother subject. But for the preset, what I found optimal for maintaining the quality and FPS of the stream, at least for this graphics card, was max performance. The GTX 1650 Super, remember, is going to be rendering the game and encoding it to your Twitch or YouTube channel at the same time. So it's not the fastest graphics card in the world, so it will need not as high of like a streaming preset. So max performance I think will do the trick. That's what I did for my Apex Legends stream, and it was okay, but you're welcome to experiment more on your own time if you want to go to a higher quality preset. But as for the actual video, I actually stuck it to 1080p 60 frames per second, which to explain why I kept it at max performance. If you were to output at 720p, maybe you'll have an easier time, and maybe you could do like performance or even quality mode. But for the frames per second, keep it to 60, you know, because the speeds you can do above 60 frames per second on pretty much most games that it runs. But yeah, that's basically how you stream. And just kind of like as a rule of thumb, if the game you're running is like running really well, like above 100 frames per second, then it's pretty much good to go for streaming, because adding that streaming element on top of running the game at the same time is not going to be too taxing on this computer. But if your game is struggling to get 60 frames per second as is, and you're thinking of streaming at the same time, then your stream's going to get lagging choppy, or you're going to have to stream at 30 frames per second rather than 60. So just think about that. This PC can stream, but it is nowhere near the quality of like a super high-end PC, or even that of like a dual PC setup where you have one PC that's dedicated just to streaming and a PC that's dedicated just to gaming. We're not Ninja here. We're not Dr. Disrespect with thousands of dollars. We have a $500 PC here. So this isn't going to be perfect while streaming, but it can at least do some. If you made it to this point in the video, congrats, we are almost done. But now kind of like, I'm gonna lay off the praising and get more into like the things that I don't like and like about this gaming PC, because it is 500 bucks and it's not perfect. So the main thing is that since this build uses a mid-range B365 motherboard and not a Z390 motherboard, again, you cannot overclock any K-series Intel processors on this motherboard. But again, I don't think that's that much of an issue if you're a gamer, because there are diminishing returns once you exceed like 4.3 gigahertz on a processor while overclocked for gaming. Again, you're really only going to notice those overclocking gains in CPU intensive applications like editing or rendering. Next up, one thing I don't like is that this processor used is only 4 threads, which again, I don't think is a deal breaker for gaming, but if you wanted something more for like editing and rendering, those extra threads would be useful. And actually, same applies for streaming. Those extra threads would be useful if you were to stream with that processor, but that isn't the case, which is why I offer that GTX 1650 Super option with its NVEC encoder, since that'll do a better job than the i3-9100F at stream encoding. Another thing you want to think later down the road is the resale value of that i3 processor, because unlike Ryzen 3 or Ryzen 5 processors, the i3 brand has really fallen and it's not as good as Ryzen. So reselling that i3-100F is going to be a little bit tough, but I'm just gonna let you know that in advance if you do decide to upgrade the processor later down the road. And as far as video editing goes, this PC will be totally fine for like your basic gaming montage or stream highlights video or whatever basic project you'll be throwing at it. It'll be totally fine. Yeah, it does have a 4-core, 4-threaded processor, but at least you'll be able to scrub through the footage and make your edits. The only issues for editing I see with this PC is say like if you have like a Sony a7S III, with H.265 footage, that's going to be really tough to decode. That's the only situation where I see video editing being a problem with this PC, is if you're dealing with serious high-end footage. But if you're just dealing with gaming highlights from Twitch, not a problem. So those were all the things I didn't like, and now let me finish up with the things that I did like, which obviously is the price to performance. You're getting a lot of bang for your buck for this PC, and I think you may even get like a little more bang for your buck with that upgraded version with the faster GTX 1650 Super that can also stream at the same time. And if you want that upgraded version, you'll have that nicer looking CPU cooler, extra fans, and those braided cables, which I think looks really sick for a budget gaming PC. And one funny thing that I think is going to happen over the lifespan of this PC is that since Ryzen has been so dominant, it has been sort of lowering down the price of high-end 8th gen and 9th gen i5 and i7 processors, or even not i9. i9's been pretty much the same. So if you wanted to pick up like an i5 9600F or an i7 9700F, those may not be expensive as you think later down the road if you have this PC and want to upgrade to a multi-core processor that's 6 or 8 cores. And finally, compared to my last $500 gaming PC, I will say I believe that one is slightly faster because it does have a Ryzen 6-core processor and pretty much the same graphics card. However, that gaming PC has parts that are pretty much no longer in stock and are really hard to get your hands on, whereas this one is all ready to go. So that is it for my $500 gaming PC build guide. I applaud those of you who made it to the end of the video. If you did make it to the end of the video, put hashtag scatterwoke in your comment, and that'll let me know you made it to the end of the video. And I will heart those that I see with that hashtag. So if you like this video, you'll probably like my other incoming PC build guides, especially with RTX 3000 on the horizon. So if you're looking into a high-end PC build, you may want to subscribe to the Scattervolt channel because I'll have those coming out, as well as the budget gaming setup that'll feature this gaming PC. And if you want to become more involved with the community, I have a Discord, a Twitch, a Twitter, an Instagram, and a TikTok, which may or may not exist within the next month. We'll see what happens. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and this is the Scattervolt channel, signing out.